IELTS Cast, episode 29.
You're listening to IELTS Cast, the podcast that puts you in touch with successful IELTS candidates from around the world. Listen and learn as they explain how they achieved Band 7, 8 and even 9. Now, here's your host, Ryan.
Hello and welcome to IELTS Cast. Today I'm speaking with Hois, an IELTS candidate from Hong Kong. Hois recently took his IELTS and scored an overall of 7.5, and that was on the general exam. He scored a band 8 in listening, a band 7.5 in both reading and speaking, and a band 6.5 on his writing. Hi, Hois, and welcome to IELTS Cast.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Good. Now, as we were talking before we started this recording, Hois, you were telling me a little bit about your relationship to the language, to international travel. So why don't we start with talking about why you took the IELTS?
Yeah, so I came here to London since 1.5 years ago, and I got a job, so they could sponsor my visa, but to get a UK work permit, you've got to have IELTS test result. So that's why I took this test.
I see, and that explains why you took the general.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, so Hois, you're currently in London, and you've been there for about 2 years. You were telling me that you've traveled everywhere, it sounds like. I mean, you spent time in the U.S. And maybe we can just share with everybody, you were 2 years, is that right, in total in the U.S., in various cities?
Yeah, in the U.S., almost 2 years.
Right. And so now you're almost 2 years in the U.K. You had spent 7 years in Japan. And I imagine in Hong Kong you grew up with English in your household?
No. Absolutely Chinese.
Okay, but you studied English at school, I imagine?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've had quite an extensive history with the language.
Well, yeah, I think the public schooling didn't really get me into the correct English education. And what I really began to studying English by myself, that, took me into the right channel to learn the language, I think. So, I mean, the education in schools not very helpful for me, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then you kind of took it upon yourself to learn the language on your own.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's start by going through a couple of the tips. Now, Hois has provided me with this very thorough list of ideas and tips and experiences that he had with the IELTS. So he and I are going to go through these one by one, and he's going to elaborate a little bit upon how they can help people that are listening to this do better in their IELTS. There are a couple of general things that you had mentioned you wanted to share. Do you want to elaborate upon those?
Yeah. So bring a pen, more than one, maybe bring some pens and some pencils and rubber, although they will provide you some pencils and rubber if you don't have one. And also bring a ruler that will help you speed up your reading. And I will explain that while we are discussing the reading section later. And also bring an identification, whatever you use, maybe your passport, driving license, whatsoever. So, and also a letter of correspondence. They will send you an admission letter for the exam. So don't forget that. I suggest don't bring water. Otherwise, it will allure you to drink too much water, and probably, you have to take a toilet break, and then that will take your time. And don't drink too much water.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing you and I were talking about before the recording started. That perhaps some people don't know is that you're not really given bathroom breaks, and if you take a bathroom break, it cuts into the time that you use on the exam.
Yeah. So you can't go to the bathroom while they are. You have to use your own exam time. You are not allowed to go to visit the bathroom while they take away your test papers or doing their announcement. Absolutely no. You have to, use the time while you are doing your test to visit the toilet.
Okay, and now without going into graphic detail, you had this very experience on your writing exam, didn't you?
Yeah, I really couldn't hold it. So in the second hour, the third hour, I really had to go, and then they will have a computer and a fingerprint stuff for the identification, and you have to put your fingerprint and come back also to identify it's real you. I was quite embarrassed because I was the only person who visited the toilet. So, yeah.
Well, maybe there's some strategy that somebody else listening to this could let us know. But so you say that they fingerprinted you as you left, and then they made sure you were the same person when you came back.
Yeah.
So we'll start with talking about the listening section. So what are a few of the things that you wanted to share, Hoy?
So when the listening starts, that you're allowed to read the test paper. So just flip all the pages and get a general idea about what you're going to do first. Just like spend 10 seconds, and then to me, I think it's really useful to find out the section which contains most text, because if while you're listening, you can't really pay attention on reading if it contains a lot of text, and you don't know where you're going to focus while you listen to the tape. So I think it's best to spend a lot of time reading on the sections with the most amount of word. Yeah.
Very good advice. Now, this is typically section 3 or section 4.
Yeah. And section 1 and 2 would be quite simple, and you don't really need that much time. You just see the question and you know what kind of answer you need to pick up in the tape. It's rather straightforward. You don't need to spend that much time on preparing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That's very good advice.
And for those section 1 and 2, you don't have to look into the question that detailedly. Just get a rough idea of what you need to know, what kind of information you need to capture. Say, usually the first section is about some personal details, like getting a flat or joining the library, and then they will ask you your personal details, and so it's really quite straightforward, and you prepare that while you'll be given some time just right before the start of the listening, and it will be every conversation will be break up. I think the first session, second session, and the third session will be break up by 2 parts.
Right.
And just use that time, just reading, do a quick scan for all the questions, and try to predict the answer so that you can get the precise image about the questions, that what you are going to answer. Otherwise, you just lightly read through the questions. Actually, you don't know what you're going to do about it. So I found that I roughly, make a guess about the answers. I could get more than 50% of chance the right answer. It's pretty common sense. Like, use your imagination and imagine what kind of situation is about the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I think this applies to the very first visual example that you've included here, doesn't it?
Yeah, the first visual example is that, so what I'm showing here is an expedition across Atora Mountains, and then prepare for the trip. So probably a map, or you can write it down, a map. Above that, don't write next to it because it can mess up with your answer, so don't do that. So write somewhere else, maybe a map or a I don't know, a pair of shoes or mountain shoes or anything, and so you know what it's gonna be about when the answer. When you listen to the answer, you get a very strong impression about the answer. You're never going to forget that.
I see. So that's interesting too, because you actually guess something in your mind, and for you even pencil it down, and that sort of gets you into the zone of listening for some sort of object that you would be preparing, or that you would have to have with you when you go on this sort of trip. So even though that, I mean, you're probably miles off from what the real answer is, you're in kind of the general feeling of what the type of response is going to be.
Yeah. And what, that's the 13th number, 13, climb highest peak in. So I didn't pay attention to the preposition in. So I thought that would be a height. And actually, it's going to be a place,
Yes.
a place's name. So also watch out the connection. So don't, although you try to familiarize yourself with the questions, also pay attention to the prepositions, and that will help you out, getting the correct answer.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a wonderful example that you've shared here, because if we look at question 11, so the question is preceded by an article, a. So we know that it's going to be a noun of some kind. Total length of the trip, we know this is going to be a number, and as you pointed out, the preposition in, this lets us know that it's going to be a place. So yeah, there's lots of little cues there that are helping us predict what the answer could be. So Hoy, for each of these questions, were you writing little predictions?
Yeah. Don't write next to it, because like I wrote one time a place, and I thought, and then the answer was said, for example, say HSBC, okay, and then HSBC place, and it could make sense sometimes. So you can scramble up your prediction and the right answer. So that could be dangerous. So write far apart from the answer, and then you won't get mess up with yourself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You might get into the zone where you're actually putting your prediction into part of the question in some strange way.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to talk with you about some of these other points that you've brought up. You talk about using abbreviations. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So when you take notes, just use you can use abbreviation. You don't have so much time to write down everything. I used to take notes while I listened to the test, but I found that sometimes you just miss out the answer completely, because you haven't got familiarized yourself with the questions, and you don't realize that. Sometimes it's useful to come back. If you have taken notes, then you can come back and pick up the answers. But I think it's pretty rare, because if you have familiarized yourself with the questions, then you are very likely to be able to get the answers. So probably you don't really need to take notes. But when you put down your answer on your question book, you can just use contraction. For example, meter, just write m, like for minute, hour, just h. But do remember that I'm not a native speaker. Plurality is really important. I'm not so sure it's marked or not, but I found that a lot of time I didn't really pay attention to the s, and I missed out the s, and that could become a wrong answer.
Are you talking about, for example, if the answer were 10 seconds?
10 seconds, obviously, it's plural. You will know, but sometimes, for example, students, and you just miss out the s. I think it could be marked as wrong. I'm not so sure. I'm not a marker, so I want to go for the next graph, the next picture.
Yep.
So you can see there are four. There's a lady who has a suitcase with her, and when you listen to the tape, you hear something, but if you haven't familiarized with all these four pictures, you don't really know what are the real difference between different images, different pictures. So one time I did this exercise, I didn't know what I should have pay attention to. So if you see this kind of pictures, that they have a very tricky difference between among them. So spot out what are the difference. Like for example, A and D, they look very similar. It's very far away for A and D, and it actually took me a lot of time to figure out what's the train is not there. So while I was able to figure out the difference between them, the answer has already gone. I've already forgotten what the tape said.
What's your strategy here, Hoy? Do you make mental notes in the four images, or do you circle things? Or?
Just circle. What are the differences? Mm-hmm. The next point is this is also from the past papers, Cambridge IELTS past papers, and a session doesn't have to be 10 questions. If it has 12, and it's on the 11th, 12th questions are on the next page, and you just turn yourself off after you answer the 10th question. Right. Then you will probably miss out, 2 marks, and that will really hurt. So when you check the paper, make sure how the number of question you have in that section. I think that could be important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Good advice. Yeah.
The until the last minute, you really have to pay attention throughout the conversation. Just don't turn yourself off. The next graph is when you see ABC there, right? It's about men and women, but you don't know which represent men, which represent women, and that when you do 36, you need to find out which is man and which is woman, and you will lose time and you probably will miss the next answer. So what I suggest is write man for women for A, man for B, and both men and women for C. So that will make sure you won't lose time on checking out.
Yeah, it's a great advice. There are questions, that I agree. If you can make some sort of visual shortcut for yourself, you should do it, because otherwise you're going to be fumbling. The answer has already gone by. You're trying to replay it in your mind, and you'll definitely get yourself confused and lose marks. That's a really good tip.
Yeah. I have one special occasion that they purposely test you 14 and 40, and actually I re-listened to that. It was really ambiguous. So if there are multiple choice for question, you can see answer A is 14, answer B is 40. Really pay attention to the tone, I guess, which is the stress. 14, they could say for T, something like that, and 49, and it could be 14 and 9. I can't really remember what was the case, but it was really tricky, and after I have to revise that question many times to make sure it really was the answer. I was really bewildered while I was listening the tape. So if there is that kind of number question and it's multiple choice, you can see 14 and 40, maybe 13, 30. So do pay attention to the end sound, 14, 40. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, Hoy, I mean, just listening to these past couple of tips that you shared, you do a lot of cueing for yourself, and I think that's a really healthy strategy to have. Is you predict, not only do you try to predict what the answer is, you also try to predict areas that will give you a problem. So, like for example, cueing yourself with that little visual man, woman, or men and women, or as you just said here, I mean, you see the question has 14 and 40. Okay, you're going to cue yourself to listen carefully for either of those numbers, because if that comes up as the answer and you hear it wrong, then that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, so how I study the test is I didn't attend any class before taking the test. So
Yep.
the only person who can help me was myself. And so always do a test 2 times and you will find out why it was difficult. Just find it out yourself. Don't just rush through and then you think the more tests you've done, the better you will perform. It doesn't really is the case. So just try to analyze how you were fooled and how to avoid the trap. I think you can study yourself how they set up the test and the trick. Talking about listening, I've got something else to share.
Okay.
I don't know about other people. Actually, I get quite nervous listening to Australian accent, and then they say Australia as Australia, and pen as pin. I thought pin.
Yeah.
And the conversion of the vowels are pretty tricky, and I look into Wikipedia, finding out how the conversion of the vowels. I think it's a good way. I mean, for me, I have to, before the test, I need to find out which section is about Australia, and then I'm going to pay special attention to that. I need to. Yeah. I'm really nervous listening to the Australian accent.
So, Hoy, let's move on to the reading. What can you tell us about that?
So reading, it's I'm taking general training. I think general training it's much easier than academic module. You got 3 articles in academic modules and 4 sections in general training. And I think the shorter the article is, the easier you can get the idea about the text. It's not as deep as academic, but most likely the last section of general training is like academic module section. So I did some general training past papers, and I found it was okay, but I have a timer every time when I do the test. So I found myself I've got some time overrun when I do the last section. So, and that's why I started doing the test in academic module, and then to find out how I can answer all these questions more precisely.
So you used academic reading tests to help prep you for the final sections of the general.
Yeah. So I do double the amount of practice for reading.
Okay.
Yeah. So I try to set up a business about for reading. That's a topic I have been studying on how to read faster. So in one episode of your show, there was a guy who suggested a gentleman. I don't know whether you remember or not. His name is Tony Buzan. So he teaches you how to speed read, and usually a person can read at one spot. You can read like three words at a time. So because I have been studying about the subject, how to improve your rate of reading, so I developed a web application that can help you read faster, to train yourself with reading in a more efficient way. And if you don't mind, I mention about it.
Yeah, sure, go ahead and plug it.
The URL is www.jendous.com. And
let's just say that one more time. So it's www.jendous.com. That's Zhendu?
Yeah, correct. That's
and this is it like the French meaning for soft and the name Gen?
No, actually it's Chinese. It means simple read, but I can't
Oh, I see.
the domain has been registered, and then so I twist a bit and make it read as Jandu, and also looks a bit classy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice. It is a nice URL.
So everyone can register and get a free account, and what it does is it can capture all the text, the contiguous paragraphs in a web page, and then it will form a text player for you. It plays out for you. You can adjust how many words you read at a time, and using that application, I have doubled my reading speed.
So this is an application that you developed.
Yeah.
And in developing it, you were able to double the speed at which you read text in English.
Yeah, that's.
Tell us more about how the technical side of it. How does it work? Now I got the website up here, and I see you have a couple of introductory videos. Now, maybe you can tell us. The videos are 8 minutes long, so I'm not going to play them right now. But tell us a bit about why does it work? Why does it help you to speed your reading up?
Look, because when you read a large page of text, you spend a lot of time on sweeping through your eye from left to right, left to right, left to right. That actually takes you a lot of time from reading. What my application does is it contains a page full of text into a limited size of container, and it plays out for you, and you stare at one place, and then so you can read in a relaxed way. It doesn't. When you see a lot of text, then you're kind of reluctant to start reading it, even because it's not entertaining. It's so boring. And if the text moves itself, then it's animated, because human eyes are naturally attracted to moving objects, and the text is moving, then it won't get you so boring. That's the second point. The third point is when you're reading. So sometimes there are too many lines. You could skip a line and you read to the end of a line, and then the next line you found that it doesn't really make sense with the last line you're reading, and then you just go back and forth, try to find out which line you were reading. So if you've got less lines, then you won't be worried about missing a line. So that comes to why you need a ruler while you're doing your reading test. So bring a ruler, just while you're reading, just hide all the text below. Just keep scanning through the text while you're reading, and you can you won't. That will make sure you won't miss a line, and the context is fluent. You won't make a mistake about missing lines.
So let me see if I've got the strategy correct here. So firstly, you're advising people, if they want to learn how to speed read, they should be focusing somewhere near the center of the line of text. They don't draw their eyes from left to right as they normally would.
Yeah, so don't be too greedy. So you have a page full of text, and actually it's a distraction for you to read. Why do I say so? Because while you're reading something, and then you just capture images from outside the focus of your eye. Do you see what I'm talking about? And then you're probably some word, they have more magic power that will draw your attention from it. So use the ruler that can help you hide out everything below, because you're not going to read about it. You just focus on the current place you're reading on, and that will help you focus more, make less mistakes while you try to. If you read something else, pick up something, some content from somewhere else, and probably you will make a guess about the context, and it doesn't actually mean that, but just because you pick up something else because you're too greedy to read something far below that you're not supposed to read yet.
So then, as far as IELTS is concerned, is this? It sounds as though you perhaps did you preview the questions before you did the speed reading, or did you speed read and then go to the questions and back to the reading?
Yep. So familiarize yourself with the question type first. The proper nouns like names, there is no meaning, and a lot of time that contains that's most important, and you won't remember the names so well because you don't know about the name. I can't recall names, and when I go through the name, it doesn't mean anything. It's just gone. But that actually is the most close and related to the answer. So if that's if the question is asking you different people or different places, then every time you read a place, just highlight that. You can't, by the way, you can't bring a highlighter. You must use your pencil or pen to highlight anything. So I suggest that if you spot a proper noun, just underline that, and it will really help you to locate the answer. When you find different people or place, and it will from the full page of text, it's really hard to identify which is name and what is what.
Okay, yeah, so that's good advice. So you're underlining things that could cue you for answers, and then your advice is specifically look for the proper nouns because they tend to be, and that's true actually. Proper nouns are a signpost because there's no synonym for them.
Yeah.
And then you also have here noted that you should write down summaries for each paragraph of the reading.
Yeah, but later I found out it wasn't really useful writing summarization.
Yeah.
Because it depends on the amount of text in that passage. If there are many paragraphs, and it isn't really helpful. I've watched a IELTS official advice on YouTube. They say you should read the first sentence and the last sentence, and then get the idea about what the paragraph is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to be very imaginative to guess what the paragraph is really talking about and to make a summarization.
I find the same thing, that sometimes that the opening, the final sentence is,
completely unrelated.
Well, yeah, or that the paragraph goes through a bit of an evolution. So it starts with one idea, and then as it progresses towards the end, that the opinion on that idea might change, or it might just be qualified in a slightly different way.
Same here. I mean, it's not a golden rule. So if once you got trapped and it fails and your test is screwed, and you want to find the golden rule. To do the whole test. I mean, in some case, yes, it works, but you try to apply the same strategy to every section, every type of question. But if once it doesn't work, and it won't work for the whole test, you really you can't get away from reading. Skipping text. You really have to read through everything to make sure you don't get tricked. And you don't want to lose a mark.
Let me get your opinion on this. So some candidates, they have shared with me, and you've heard it on earlier shows, the strategy, and it worked for them. Like that Vidit, I mean, he was the kind of the first guy that got this rolling. And then several people after him were sharing the same strategy, which is you read through the questions first, right? And you very thoroughly underline the information that you need, and then you go I've said that wrong. You read through the questions one at a time. So you start with question one.
I tried that before.
So tell us a bit about now let me just state, in case nobody knows what we're talking about, the idea is that you read the first question, you go and find the answer. Mm-hmm. Then you read the second question, you go and find the answer. Then you read it's just kind of a question by question sort of approach to the exam. So what was your experience with it?
I remind that. So I tried to read the whole lot of questions, but you have to realize the capacity of your memory. You really can't remember that many questions. Mm-hmm. So my strategy is you read 2 questions in one time, and make sure, because you can remember, if you miss the first question, you cannot find out the answer for the first question, but you find out the content about the second question, then you know that the answer would be beforehand of the current content you are reading. So for my strategy is I read 2 questions at a time, and when you finish one question, and just read the next question, so you have got 2 in your hand, and keep reading through the passage. Just don't be too greedy. If you try to get the whole, you want to read all questions, and then so when you read through and then you will know all the answer, it doesn't work, because sometimes the question contains a lot of text, and you won't be able to remember what you have read. It's really a waste of time to do that.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well, and I appreciate you sharing this alternative approach to the examination. So if people are interested in looking into Hois' work, you can find him at jendous.com, JENDOUX, and have a look at his speed reading techniques. This is all original software that he's written himself, so you can give it a bit of a test, and then maybe somebody down the road will give us some feedback on how it's helped them achieve the mark that they need on the exam.
And I want to share something, because you most likely read a line by line. So my application, you can set the length of the text player. So the length of the passage is set. Usually there are like 7 words per line. So you can just set 7 words per line and set it to 1 line to be displayed per time. And then you just familiarize yourself in the test environment. So you just keep skimming through line by line, line by line, line by line, using my application to imitate how you do in a real test. So just set the length exactly to the same to the passage in IELTS test, and then so you can speed up your genuine reading speed.
Okay, great advice. And then you have your so the true false not given, everybody's favorite question type. So if no information can be found, then of course the answer is not given.
Yeah, but sometimes you just think it's got to be there, and like you thought maybe they just rephrase it or say it in different way, you miss it, and then you just try really hard to find out the answer, but actually it's not mentioned and it's just not given.
Okay, now do you do any sort of prioritizing for the true false not given question types? Do you save them for the end of your exam, or do you just kind of do them as they appear? I mean, if they were, say, in the second reading, first section.
Yeah, I just do it by order, really.
Okay.
But
okay.
I'm not so sure the format, because when I did some previous past papers, they have something like yes, no, not given. So as the IELTS, official videos, they emphasize read carefully about the questions. I assume, I think they really wouldn't care, just mark across, because you don't read the question, you just take your penalty. I think that would be the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, because there are a couple of things that are lenient in a surprising way. Another thing that I found surprising is, and I don't know if you knew this, Hoy, but you're allowed to write your essay, your Task 1 and Task 2 responses in all caps letters.
Writing all capital letters.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, it's on the IELTS.org website, and I find that very surprising, because a great test of your ability to write with grammatical accuracy is whether you can capitalize words properly, pronounce if they're capitalized correctly, the beginning of sentences, this basic general stuff.
Yeah.
And you apparently you don't lose any marks at all if you write everything in capital letters.
Really?
Yeah, I know, it's just bizarre. And then an examiner colleague of mine, he tells me that in all of the years that he has been teaching IELTS, he's never once seen somebody submit a writing in all caps letters. But it's true. If you look at the websites, there are several different places. I think they make mention of it at the British Council website as well.
Yeah, it's a way of cheating. It also tests out your capitalization. It's quite important.
I think so too, and I definitely don't encourage anyone listening to this to go into the exam using that as some sort of strategy.
Sure.
Yeah, anyway,
Also it takes more space, the capital letters, and
yeah, that's true.
yeah.
So did you want to start talking about writing then? I guess
Yep.
we've kind of segued into it a bit.
Sure.
So what can you share for us?
Well, I'm not, my writing score is quite low, but I don't know. When I study in Hong Kong schools, they always told me to write dear sir or madam, and it's really my first time to know, it's actually legal to write dear sirs, and it's quite, it sounds weird because I've never heard dear sirs, and I wonder whether it's an English thing or very traditional English, and also I found writing is really challenging because for general training, the thing is you have to think the case, how it happened. For example, you have been deducted £100 or dollars from your bank account, and then write to the bank saying that you are this is a mistake, and ask them to refund you. And how would a bank make a mistake? I think this is the most tricky thing, is to think the situation. Why did they make a mistake? It's not a writing test. It's a
creativity test.
Yeah. I think part 1 is more difficult than part 2, because part 2 you can have all sorts of logical arguments, and you can bring that up.
Yeah, you do definitely have to be creative in the general task 1. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned here somewhere about doing task 2 before task 1.
I think sometimes the session 1 could be very challenging because you can't think of a situation that the question is asking about. I think it's good. Don't struggle, spending time on thinking that particular thing. Just go to the second section and then start writing that. And then when you come back, maybe you get some ideas how to start your essay.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, I mean, just kind of preview yourself for task 1, go to task 2 and write it, and then come back. But again, I mean, these are strategies that people should be practicing before they get to the exam.
Yeah.
And you shared a couple of good tips. So don't use contractions if you can avoid them. I think contractions are they tend to be okay if you're writing a kind of an informal task 1 general, so like a friendly letter or something like that. That would be fun.
Just friendly letters. But when in American education they tell you can use didn't, doesn't, can't, that kind of thing. But in British writing you never do that kind of contraction in formal writing.
Oh yeah. No, I also advise people to avoid that, and also to avoid overly personal language, particularly. Well, in the letter you have to be personal, but in certain circumstances, unless it's a very formal situation where you're writing a letter of complaint or something like that. But in the essay, you definitely want to avoid this, overly personal language, unless the essay question specifically asks you for personal experiences, or if it's just a very straightforward argument essay, and it's asking for your opinion on something, but it's not asking you to share personal experiences. I think using this sort of language like our or us, or we, or my. You see some essays where every sentence has my thinking about this is, and when it gets overly personal like that, it starts to read as though it were written by a student that's in middle school. It's the essay that you would see a middle school student write, and that's not the sort of face that you want to show the examiner. You want to show them that you're capable of writing academic writing at a university level. So, as most question types is asking for formal writing, then avoid overly personal language.
Yeah.
Let's move on then, Hoy, to speaking. So you have a very respectable score of 7.5 in the speaking exam. You've got several tips here that you want to share. Why don't you go ahead and run us through them?
I'm not so sure these tips are really helpful. So I think people, when you have no experience in something, for example, they ask you describe a sport event you have been to, but in fact in your life you have never been to a football match or you never try that. You never seen the concert, and they ask you about music. How do you describe an experience? You go to a concert, but you have never tried that. Would you be allowed to ask the examiner, can I talk something else instead, because I have no experience in it?
I don't really know the answer, and that's something though that if anybody listening, if they have had experience in this, maybe they could share with us, or if an examiner is listening and wants to put us in the picture, that would be great. But I honestly don't know, Hoy. I've never heard of somebody ask for another cue card.
There are a lot of videos available on YouTube that people carry out speaking test, and they are in fact quite close to the actual test. So I advise people who have never taken speaking test before, they should go to YouTube and find out how the actual test is like, the environment, the mood, that kind of thing. You know, if you don't know anything, you can get quite nervous when you meet the examiner.
Now, how many of those videos did you run through before you took your exam?
4 or 5,
okay.
But a lot of them have quite low score, and I found the examiner had difficulty in understanding the speaker. So I tend not to watch the bad exam takers. Just watch the good ones. Take good examples, not the bad ones.
Yeah, I know, I agree with you. And the same thing, I see this in the writing section, where some people, they want to see an example Band 7 essay. And I sort of think, like, why do you want to see that? Because all you're going to see is an essay that has, is missing 2 bands of quality.
Yeah. Only read the Band 9s. No.
And why would you study that sort of essay? Because, I mean, that essay has grammatical errors in it. That's why it's a Band 7.
Yeah.
So I don't quite get the strategy behind that either. I mean, I suppose it's helpful to look at a Band 7 and then compare it to, maybe 10 or 20 Band 9 essays or Band 9 speaking sessions or Band 8.5 speaking sessions. I can understand that, because then you can see the difference. But if you're going to try to, mimic a Band 7, or I don't know. Hoy, thank you very much for sharing this wonderful information with us today, and good luck with your ambitions in the UK.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for downloading from IELTS.com. Have you achieved an overall band of 7 or higher on the IELTS exam? Why not contribute to the podcast? Contact Ryan at his blog, IELTS.com.